Hi, my name is Mike Chambers. I want to welcome you to the Create the Web event for Asia and Pacific stream. Today, I want to talk to you about, today we're going to focus on HTML5 and the modern web and what Adobe is doing in this space. So at Adobe, we very strongly believe that web technologies are the future of content and application development. And continuing to build a strong platform, a strong web, is vital to the goals of Adobe. And if we take a step back and look at where we've come from up to today in the modern web, in the early days of web development, is a much simpler development model. You primarily had one monitor that you had to worry about, one screen, probably a PC running on a desktop, and then you only really had to worry about one or two browsers, so Netscape or Internet Explorer. And if we move forward today, developing for the modern web, it's a much more complicated scenario. First of all, you have many more capabilities that you need to develop for and target, so you have a lot more stuff you can play around with, but at the same time, you have a lot more screens that you have to worry about. With the proliferation of mobile, tablet, and devices, you can't just worry about design and develop for one screen. A desktop screen, you also have to think about tablet devices, laptops, mobile devices, televisions, everything like that. And at the same time, the number of browsers that you have to worry about has also grown. There's been a lot of growth in the browser market, and this is actually one of the things that's driven browser capabilities. But it also means that as a designer and developer, you have to make sure that your content works well across all these browsers. And of course, those browsers all run on multiple platforms, so you have to worry about that. So developing for the modern web, while there's a lot of great new abilities and capabilities you can take advantage of, the complexity of developing for that has grown. So now these new capabilities on the modern web have enabled new types of creative content and experiences. And at Adobe, our goals are to enable these expressive experiences. Indeed, we want to enable the most expressive experiences possible. And there's two key reasons for this. The first is that we build on the web platform ourselves. So we just launched Creative Cloud earlier this year. That's a cloud-hosted service for getting access to all our tools and services, as well as collaborating and working with other designers and developers. And so we rely on having a rich, expressive web to build on top of. But in addition, we're also increasingly using web technologies to build our desktop tools. So it's very important that the capabilities are there so that we can build the best applications on these technologies. Secondly, we provide the tools and services that you can use, you as a designer and developer can use to create this web content. So the more expressive content that you can create on the web, the more that you can take advantage of our tools. So having a robust web platform with growing expressive capabilities is really core to Adobe. So how does Adobe help move the web forward? So there's really two key areas that we help move the web forward. The first is what I like to refer to as the web platform, moving the engine of the web forward. And we do this in two primary ways. First, we contribute to web standards in the web standards process. So that's normally working through the W3C. So working on standards, CSS, HTML5, but working to standardize new features and functionality. And second, we actually contribute to browsers, primarily through WebKit, but actually contribute code and functionality directly into the browsers. So this is the way we kind of move the core infrastructure of the web forward. The second way that we help move the web forward is by creating the tools and technologies that designers and developers can use to create content for the web. And this is something that we've done traditionally. This is where our strength is in creating great design and development tools, and we continue to do that today to enable designers and developers to create experiences for the modern web. We're going to talk more about the tooling throughout the rest of the session today, but I want to step back and talk about, focus on how we move the core infrastructure of the web together. So there's three key areas where there's three key areas that we're focusing on when it comes to web infrastructure. in the areas that we're working on moving the web forward. The first is magazine-style advanced layout, and this includes standards and specifications such as CSS exclusions and CSS regions. The second is cinematic effects. This includes CSS filters and CSS custom filters. And the third is advanced graphical effects, and this includes CSS blending and CSS composition. Now, if you've spoken or if you were at MAX last year in Los Angeles or perhaps saw the keynote online, some of these features you've probably seen familiar because we've actually talked about some of these at the past MAX. And the standardization process is actually a pretty long-term process, right? Because you have to go through the standardization body, contribute the code, test it, and then it eventually starts getting in the browsers. So this is something we've been working on over the past year and a half, and we're really excited to start seeing some of the work we've been pushing and championing beginning to make it into shipping browsers. Indeed, about 2 weeks ago, Apple released iOS 6, their mobile platform, and that included a new version of Safari, which included support for CSS filters, which Adobe has been pushing and been an active contributor to. So let's take a look now at some of the work that Adobe's been doing around this and look at CSS Filter Lab. So CSS Filter Lab is a project that you can find at html.adobe.com, and this is a little web application site that allows you to explore and play around with CSS filters and CSS custom shaders. So I'm at html.adobe.com, and I'm just going to play around. You see I have an image here. This is just an HTML image. Of course, this could be any web content. And I'm just going to apply some CSS filters. So these are just built in. They're supported in Safari today. They're beginning to be supported in more and more browsers. And these are just pre-canned filters. I'll do an invert one. And let's see. Maybe I'll do the saturation. So here I'm just applying some filters. Now, normally, these are typographical effects that I would have to do at author time within Photoshop. And so if I wanted to have different effects depending on where users are viewing them, I'd have to do multiple versions of that at author time. But now, with these features in the browser, these are things I can dynamically adjust in the browser at runtime. And again, directly in the browser. So these are CSS filters starting to become available in browsers, available in iOS 6 today. Another area that we're working on is CSS custom filters. And this is actually an area that I'm particularly excited about. So CSS custom filters allow you to create custom filters for CSS, and those can be either fragment or vertex filters. So a fragment filter allows you to adjust the pixels of the content, and a vertex shader actually allows you to dynamically adjust the geometry. So you can see here I have this crumple effect that I've applied on here. Let me not blur it so much. So there's a crumple effect here. You can actually look in here. There's a spherify effect. So let's go in here. There's this page curl effect, which is kind of a neat effect. So you can see I can play around with this. So this is a CSS custom shader. Now, one of the cool things about CSS Filter Lab is it'll actually show you the CSS that you need to use it. So if you look down at the bottom, it's the actual CSS that you can just copy that and paste it into your content to get this effect using the custom filters or using the regular filters. So let's see. So and the other thing that's kind of neat about this is that I can actually animate this. So if let's bring this out, and I have a little timeline down here. Bring it over there. And so now if I hit play, you see I get this little animation effect. And then I can actually grab the CSS, is using CSS animations. I can grab that again to place that into my content. Now, this is just an example of some of the new stuff that you'll be seeing increasingly over the coming months and year. You play around with this. Is available at html.adobe.com. We've open sourced the entire project, so you can play around with it and learn how all that stuff works. So we spent a lot of time over the past 2 years, meeting with customers, really trying to understand where the pain points are in the designer developer workflow, especially for web development, web design development, and how those workflows are affected by modern web development, right? Some of the things we talked about earlier, having more capabilities, more browsers, and more screens that you have to worry about. And as what we heard was that the workflow is not so great, right? So before the modern web, you had this workflow where you maybe do your comp in Photoshop as a designer, then you hand off that to a developer, and then they would implement it and hope they get everything right. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of refreshing, and that this workflow for modern web development has gotten even worse because in addition to kind of what was already a broken workflow, you also have to worry about getting all this to run across multiple screens, multiple devices, multiple browsers. So the key takeaway that we learned from this, from coming out and talking to you, was that the modern web needs modern tools. And so we've looked at this and thought about, like, how can we solve this? What can we do differently that helps improve this workflow and solve some of these problems for developing for the modern web? So our solution to this is what we're referring to as the Adobe Edge Tools and Services. So the Adobe Edge Tools and Services is a family of tools and services targeted at modern web development that's really underpinned by 3 key tenets. The first is that it's optimized for creating mobile-ready web content and applications. Secondly, all these tools are focused on a specific task. So we're not building monolithic tools that try to do everything. These are very small, lightweight tools that focus on doing one thing and doing it very well. And then third, they focus on improved productivity without hiding the underlying web technologies. And what that means is that in many cases that you're actually going to be working on the design surface that you're targeting. So we actually use these same web technologies to build a lot of these tools and services. And so through the rest of the stream today, we're going to actually take some time and go through each of the Edge tools and services, go a little more in depth on them, and give you an idea of just what they enable and how they can make your modern web development workflow a lot easier. So I'd like to invite up Lee Brimlow, who's an evangelist with Adobe, and Lee's going to talk to us about the first tool today, Edge Animate. So Lee.
Thanks, Mike. So it's great to be with you today. And like Mike said, I'm an evangelist with Adobe. A lot of people out there may know me as a Flash guy. I've obviously been doing Flash for years. And one of the things that's great about Edge Animate is I can use all of those same skills that I've accrued through years of Flash development and bring them over to the web standards world. There we go. Yeah, so in a nutshell, what Edge Animate is it allows you to do web animated content using CSS and JavaScript. And what I'm going to walk you through is just a simple demo of how you would create animation using Edge Animate. So let me switch over to my demo machine. Okay, so I'm going to launch Edge Animate now. Now, all I'm going to do is to create a simple blank project, and I'm going to import an image asset that I'm actually going to animate around. So let me just grab that image and go to my desktop here. And we want to bring assets into Edge Animate. All we have to do, we can either go through like the import menu, which is actually in the tool, or we can just drag them directly into our project. Now, what that's actually created is essentially a div element with its background image property, its CSS property set to that image. And if we look over on the left in the properties panel, we can see all of the various CSS properties that I can actually animate inside of this tool. Now, if you've come from a background of if you've used tools like Flash or even After Effects, then a lot of what you see in Edge Animate will be familiar to you. So let's say I wanted to animate this image. So inside of Edge, there's a couple of unique features to animating here. Let me just get rid of that. what I'm going to do is implement something called the pin. And if I click this little pin icon, I now have this blue span that I can stretch across. And essentially what that's doing is taking all the current properties of this image and pinning it to that point in the timeline. So now, since the playhead is at 0, I can go through and start, animating any of these properties. So let's say I want to scale this down by 25%. And you'll notice down in the timeline, the animation is automatically being created for me. So let's say I also want to change the rotation to 360. Down in the timeline now, I can just hit the space bar to get a preview of what that animation looks like. Now, you're going to want to actually go out to the browser to get a real indication of performance. But one of the things you'll notice is that this is a linear animation. And typically, if you're wanting to do high-end type of animation, you're going to want to apply some easing effects to this. So I can actually select this span in the timeline, go to this easing panel, and if you used Flash before, you'll notice all of these easing equations that's very common to use. So I'm going to choose ease in, out, back. And when I want to test this in a browser, all I have to do is to hit Command or Control Enter, and it's actually going to launch that project in the browser. And you can see when I refresh. Now, I don't know what actual frame rate you guys are viewing at home, so definitely try this out yourself to see. But I can verify that this is actually running perfectly here. So another thing, if you've come from a Flash background, that's really powerful is the concept of symbols. So where you have, say, multiple elements that you want to animate, and you want to group them together into a container. We can do that inside of Edge Animate. I can just right-click on this, say Convert to Symbol, and you'll notice that even that verbiage is the same as it is in Flash. So I'm going to create that symbol, and now I can double-click to go into Edit mode on the symbol. And what I can do now is I can start attaching code to this as well, timeline code. So let's say when the playhead hits a certain part of the timeline, it's going to do some type of action. So if I click this little Insert Trigger button, it launches this little code editor where I can insert now some JavaScript. jQuery is actually built into Edge Animate, so if I wanted to start doing some jQuery, I could do that as well. And there's also these helpful code snippets on the side. So all I'm going to do is to say, play this timeline in reverse. So that way, once the timeline hits the end, it's going to play in reverse. And I'm also going to add a trigger to the start of the timeline so that when it gets back to the beginning, it's going to play that animation. Now let me jump out to the browser. And now you can see an animation that's coming in, has that nice easing effect, and then coming back out. So now I have essentially a looping animation. Now, another thing, like I mentioned, if you're used to using Flash before, a lot of times you're combining timeline animation with scripted animation. So one of the things I can also do is to, let's say, come out here in the main timeline. I can add a trigger, and I can actually use jQuery to say, let's fade out this symbol. So again, I can use these little snippets. I can say, get symbol. And now I can give it the name of that symbol in the timeline called colors. And now I can actually get to the jQuery DOM element, which I can then use to do programmatic animation by saying get symbol element. And there's actually a full reference for this JavaScript actually in the tool if you go to the help menu. And let me just shorten this a little bit. I'll just call it L for element. And now I can just use, let's say, the jQuery fade out method to actually fade that element out. So now we can see it's animating, and then when it gets to that point in the top level timeline, it's actually using jQuery to animate this stuff. Now, if you have other popular, your favorite tweening libraries, you can use those as well. For instance, a lot of the Flash tweening libraries are being ported to JavaScript. Like the GreenSock library, so you could also plug those directly in. So that's basic animation and how you would do it. But there's also some drawing tools inside of Edge. And what these are essentially drawing div elements. So I'm going to get this rectangle. I'm going to come out here. I'm going to essentially create a button. And what I've just created is an HTML div. So I'm going to set its background to black. Then I'm going to create a text element here. And let me just change it to white. So now essentially I have the elements of creating a button like I would in Flash. And now I can turn this into a symbol, select both of those, convert to symbol. And I can even do things like changing the cursor when your actual mouse is over this. So I can change it to, let's say, the hand cursor. And now if I wanted to add interactivity to this button, with it selected, up here I can click on the Open Actions button. This allows me to respond to a whole host of different event handlers for interaction. I'm just going to respond to the click event, and I'll just make the browser change its location. I'll make it go to the html.adobe.com site. And I'll test that now. You can see our animation, and when I click on this button, it's now launched, gone to a different location. So very simple stuff, but I think as you get involved more with this tool, you'll see that it's very similar to how you've worked in Flash before, and it's just a really nice experience for creating animated web content. So with that, I'll just say it's my honor, frankly. If you think I had good stuff to show, this guy's going to really do a really great job. Well, he's Jacob Server, basically. Senior Product Manager, HTML Design. So, yeah,
cool.
Take it away, buddy.
Hi, guys. Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be here. So today, I'm actually going to be giving you a sneak peek at a brand new tool that we've been working on at Adobe called Edge Reflow. So responsive design is a whole new philosophy about how to create web design content that can spread across all of your different screen sizes. Desktop, tablet, mobile, and you have that same experience that's consistent. So it's been very challenging today. A lot of tweaking CSS, testing in different browsers, playing with it, testing it on devices. But there's been no way to see how this content is going to react, how to visually create it. So we've been working on Reflow, and I want to give you a quick demo. So I am going to pull up a quick site here. Switch screens. Great. So this is a website called FoodSense. It's a responsively designed site. So you can see as I resize my screen, see if we go all the way out, we have a full menu bar. We've got a very big experience. As I start to shrink my browser down, my menu starts to shrink down. I have less real estate on my screen. As I keep going, I can start to move my navigation, relay out the page. But as the page continues to shrink down, my space becomes an even higher premium. So I need to make the most use of it. I had 4 columns of content at the bottom. Now I have 2. I've hidden the icons that were inside of my menu. And this would be a great tablet experience. But as I continue to shrink down to a mobile experience, I move to a single column of content. I move my menu all the way up to the top. But the question is, how do you create this experience? How do you design it? How can you think about all of these different screen sizes simultaneously? And that's where Reflow comes in. So we've started with this tool, and from the ground up, building it in HTML and JavaScript. So we have an HTML design surface. Anything you can create on this surface is going to render in a browser. You have the confidence in this design surface. We've also built a flexible grid directly onto the design surface, and a little resize handle to let you see what sizes you want to work with. So let's just kind of play around here a little bit. I can drop a box, and by default, we use margin and padding to position elements. By default, widths of containers are defined as percentages. So I will drop them. We'll do a little resize. If we look at our properties inspector, You see here, he's defined as about 57%. And you can see the margin visualization is telling you where on the screen it is. So if I resize my canvas, just like I was resizing the browser, everything scales perfectly. Now, obviously, your website is going to be a little bit more than a box. We need to start to style elements. We need to bring image assets in. So we have a style panel that starts to expose all the properties of CSS. So ultimately, this box is really just a div, so we can apply some colors. We've created a color picker to let you look through colors either as RGBA, hex, HSLA. So let's kind of roll through, grab a nice blue of some sort. There we go. We can also start to layer content. I could drop image assets on, or I can add a gradient layer. So we've built on top of our original color picker to create a gradient picker. Now you see here, these were colors that the color that I just used, and it stores all of the recent colors inside of your project. So let's take this gradient, drop it out, just give it a bit of a highlight. There we go. I can create as many different gradient layers as I'd like. I can reorder these layers and have a very visual experience. Let's round our corners and maybe even make the right side flat. Cool. So let's give ourselves a little bit of a border. There we go. Maybe even a drop shadow or two. Increase our blur maybe. There we go. And you've got a little joystick where you can start to see in real time how this drop shadow is going to appear in your design. You can create either an outset shadow like this, create another one, maybe make an inset shadow. I think it'll look a little bit better as white. We'll increase our blur again. So you can start to really design using what's capable inside of CSS. Now, if we go and let's look at that food sense application again, but this time inside of Reflow. So here we go. This is what we just saw on the web, and we have all of these breakpoints predefined. Now, as I start to scroll through, I get to my first breakpoint, and you can see I've now condensed my menu. I've gotten rid of some of that text. But the real power of Reflow here is that if I were to design this inside of Photoshop, I may create 3, 4, 5 different comps. But those are only single snapshots. I have no idea what's going to happen in between those breakpoints. Because as you saw when I resized this, just before my 960 breakpoint, my design actually broke. This content is too wide. So I can simply move my media query and start to update my design. I can fix this. So as I scroll through, I get to my next breakpoint, and rather than having a fixed width element on the left, I've changed my layout properties to be 100%. So now it'll take up the entire width of your body. Moving on down the line again, you can see I've started to hide the icons, but I have these elements that are still 4 wide. So rather than being 25% of my content, let's change it to 50. I update this guy to 50. And you can see, since we're using web layout, it automatically pushes everything down. Same thing holds true when I get down to mobile. I've pushed my menu up to the top, and I really just want to make this element 100%. So we want this to be of some value to development. CSS is really evolving as the design language of the web. So if we pop all the way back out here to the top, let's take a look at this menu bar. I've got a little code button over here, and it's going to show me the CSS that defines that element. So you can see your base style here, but then the properties that have gotten overridden at each of my defined media queries. So you can either go in and select just the properties that you want, copy and paste them out. Each element, you can click the little clipboard, or You can select here. It'll copy out all the CSS and even the media queries for you to use inside of your project. So thanks a lot. We are still in the early stages, but we want to have an early preview out before the end of the year. You can go to html.adobe.com and sign up for notifications so you can get your hands on Reflow as soon as it's available to the public. And with that, I would like to introduce Ryan Stewart. And I believe you're going to be talking about Edge Inspect.
Yes. All right. Thanks,
All right.
Jacob.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much, Jacob. I'm Ryan Stewart, a developer advocate, and I'm going to talk about Edge Inspect, which is a tool that we have which will let you test across a number of mobile devices and will help streamline your mobile testing altogether. One of the things that we heard when we talked to customers all the time was that you have to test on the device to really get a feel for how your mobile content is going to display and perform when you're deploying it on mobile devices. And when we talked to them and got a little deeper about some of the pain points there, it was around, I have all these devices, how do I actually manage the things and how do I set everything up correctly so that I will be able to test on this without picking up the device, without reloading the page and testing. So we created Adobe Edge Inspect to help with that exact problem. Edge Inspect is just in the browser. So let me open up Chrome. It's just a browser extension. It runs inside your browser. There's also a desktop application that you need, as well as applications on each of the devices that you want to connect with Edge Inspect to. And this is a good example, so I'm going to use this right here. So I'll double-click this Edge Inspect icon, and all the devices that I have connected are now here in this menu. I've got my Prime tablet as well as my iPod Touch connected. And let me show you what this looks like in the presenter mode. So here I've got my two tablets. You can see, as Jacob talked about, we've got this nice responsive design site, so a single column layout for those links. On the tablet, I've got the two column layout there. If I put this in portrait mode, I'll have two column layout. And if I change the URL here from my browser, let's go to another responsive design site, html.adobe.com. It's going to automatically push that URL out to my other devices, and it'll change them on the fly so I can see how html.adobe.com is also being responsive. And Edge Inspect will make sure that my browsers never shut down or my phones don't turn off, so that when I'm in testing mode, I can test and be always in the zone. Some of the other things that we have with Edge Inspect are the ability to remotely test and modify content on the devices. So I'm going to go ahead and select my iPod here, and I'm going to click on this remote inspection button. And it's going to give me access to Google Chrome tools, but connecting to my remote device remotely so that I can actually inspect and change things if I want to here. There's my iPod. So I'll select that, go to Elements. And then I can see the code that's on my phone. And as I select some of these elements from within Google Chrome Web Tools, you'll see it start to highlight here on the phone itself. So here I've got my main section. I'll highlight that. We can go up here to the banner, highlight that. And I can also, just because it's the sort of same Google Web Inspector tools that I know and love, I can also make changes here and modify some of these things. So let me go ahead and change this container. Let's do something that will be noticeable. Change the header text color. Actually, drill down to the H1. We'll change the text color here. We can just double click on this. We'll change it to straight black. Or we'll do a hot pink, actually, so we can tell it's changing. Hot pink. And then that's going to change the content directly on my device. Where did it go? When I have any H2 elements or any H1 elements. So down here, we can see that that's changing in real time. Change it to red. And there we'll go back to red. So we can actually inspect the device and change things on the device as we need to, so we can get a feel for exactly how it should look and what's going to happen when we make changes. The last feature of Edge Inspect that's kind of helpful is the ability to take screenshots across a number of devices. So I can click the little camera button here, and it's going to take a screenshot of exactly how the page looks for all the devices that are connected to my computer. Open them up with the image folder, and I can see down here the ones that got taken today. There's a PNG of my iPod. And I can also see this text file, via this text file, some basic information about about my device, the name, the OS version, so I can see exactly which device is rendering which screenshot content. The other thing that I want to talk about today is a service that we have in the cloud called PhoneGap Build. You may be familiar with PhoneGap, which is a way for you to build mobile applications using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. One of the things we heard about in talking to web developers was they loved the concept, but they didn't want to deal with native SDKs like Xcode or the Android SDK when they were taking their content and deploying it to mobile devices. So we came up with the idea of PhoneGap Build, which lets you just link to HTML, JavaScript, and CSS files, and then build a mobile application from that content behind the scenes without having to worry about native SDKs. With PhoneGap Build, I can link to a project on GitHub, or I can upload my own HTML, JS, CSS content. In this case, I'm going to grab this GitHub GitHub repo, and I will place it in in this private repo, or place it in my PhoneGap Build application screen. And it's going to go out and it's going to get all the code for that repository, and then it's going to come back and bring a bunch of information to me about what that application is based on the configuration file. So here the application's called Hello World. I've got my PhoneGap Build icon that's going to be the icon for my application. If I go ahead and click on a couple of these, I can enable debugging, I can enable hydration, which is going to let me update the application very easily with just modifying the HTML content. I won't have to reinstall the entire application. And then when I'm ready to go, I can click Ready to Build, and it's going to go out to the cloud, and it's going to build versions for iOS, versions for Android, versions for Windows Phone, versions for BlackBerry, versions for WebOS, and versions for Symbian here. While we're doing that, I can go look at some of the things that I can check out with PhoneGap Build, or some of the things I can modify. One example is I can make sure that if I have my iOS keys uploaded, I'll be able to build that for iOS as well. I can come over here and add some collaborators. So if I want my friend to work on this, since I'm on Adam's account, I'll go ahead and add myself as a developer so I can have access to this application and make changes to it. There we go. And I can also modify some of the basic settings, like whether I want the icon, or how I want the icon to display, what version of PhoneGap I want to use, because if you're targeting an older version, then that may be something that will let you target more devices. I can delete the application. And when I'm finally ready to check all this out, so when we got all the builds ready, I can either download these directly from PhoneGap Build. The IPK is here, the APK is there, or I can use this little barcode here, and it'll bring me to a responsive site on my phone that will automatically download the application for me. There we go. So let me use my barcode reader to grab this. There we go. So now you can see on my screen, it's going to go out to the PhoneGap Build site directly, and it's going to pull back a version of the application for me to download, so you can download it directly on the phone. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Lehman, who's the senior director for product manager for HTML development, and let him talk to you about PhoneGap and Edge Code.
I like that other title, senior director. Thanks for the promotion, Ryan. All right, I'm going to close some of your things here, get out of my way. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Edge Code. So you guys might have heard of Brackets, our new open source code editor for the web. But we've actually made a very special distribution of Brackets called Edge Code that's made specifically for members of the Creative Cloud. And it's sort of a nice place that we can sort of pull all together all the tools and services that you're seeing today. Because the one thing that they all have in common is that we're not hiding the code from you, right? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is at the core of all these products. So if we can bring them all into Edge Code, we can actually build a really cool workflow. So with that, let me switch over to my other screen here and show you Edge Code. Or I'll just show you Reflow as I close it, because I like to have a clean desktop, kind of like that. So the first thing you'll notice about Edge Code is that we've taken a really minimalistic approach to the UI. We wanted to keep it very, very clean, so it's just you and your code. We've also decided to start kind of challenging some of the notions that we've had in other editors. Mainly, this is built specifically for HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And so we're really going to exploit the knowledge that we have between those products. And one of the things that we do a lot as HTML developers is sort of, work in HTML, bounce into CSS a little, bounce back to HTML, then jump into JavaScript a little, bounce back to the same HTML page, and we sort of do this sort of bobbing and weaving in and out. Now, if our tool knew a little bit about those technologies, we could actually, it could actually be customized for our workflow. So one of the things that we do a lot is every time we're looking at HTML, I need to go and style it, and there's usually a style sheet that sort of backs that. Now, because of our knowledge of this, we can actually build some tooling. So I'm going to actually go ahead and select the body tag here. I'm going to hit Command-E. Now, what you're going to see here is actually what we call an inline editor or a quick edit. And this is this idea that because we know the relationship between HTML and CSS, we can actually go out and query and say, give me all the styles that apply to the body tag, and then we can show them to you in line here. Now, these inline editors are pretty cool because they don't hide any of the code that you're working on. So maybe your CSS is relative to the HTML you're working on. You need to see the ID tag. You need to see the class. Without inline editors, we'd be sort of floating on top and sort of hiding all that stuff from you, and we definitely don't want to do that. So you can see my HTML page. It goes from 9, 10, 11 after the inline editor, 12, 13, 14. The other cool thing is these inline editors then start to become part of your working document. So if I actually start scrolling here, and maybe I'll go and open another one on this H2 tag, you can see we can have multiple of these editors open at the same time. And again, they become this sort of working document that I can then work around with. So really, really cool stuff. Now, today in Edge code, we have support for CSS inline editing as well as JavaScript editing. So if I select a JavaScript function, I can actually see the function body pulled up in line, which is fantastic if I just want to look at the function signature or if I just want to write documentation or see the documentation on it. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually then show you another interesting idea we've come up with, which is around live editing. Now, for the last 20 years or so, we've done this sort of save reload dance, and we've all kind of become so accustomed to it, we might even forget that we're doing it. And it's this idea that I write in my editor, I hit save, and then I run over to the browser, I hit reload, and I see how it looks. And I probably do this hundreds of times a day as I'm working, whether it's with JavaScript or CSS. And we figured we might be able to do something a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Escape. We'll close all of my editors here. And I'm actually going to launch Chrome and open up this page that I'm working on. Now, this is actually the Getting Started guide here. You can actually see what we're working on. But I've actually established this sort of live connection between Edge code and the document. So now if I go in and start editing CSS, let's say if I kind of move this over here, maybe I'll make my toolbar go away so it's just me and my code. Say I want to go ahead and change this guy. I'll go back into my inline editor. Except now I'll maybe say, let's see, font size equals, I don't know, 5 Oh, it's pretty big. And you can see it updated live instantly as I was doing it. I can go in here and I can do something like change the color as well. I think hot pink is our favorite color today, so I'll go ahead and do that. But the cool thing is here is that I didn't have to install any extensions into Chrome. This isn't a special build. This is the same version of Chrome that you've got installed on your computer. It's the same version that you've got installed on your parents' computer. We're just opening this sort of communication and trying to make it a little bit more of a better workflow for you. So pretty cool stuff. Now, inline editors are pretty cool. We think that there's a lot of possibilities for them. And another one of those is this idea that maybe it's not just about coding. What if we could sort of bring visual tools into the inline editors as well? So let me go ahead and save this guy out. I'm going to pop over to a CSS file. And so there's a lot of times when you're basically looking at maybe colors where they're sort of represented as hexadecimal or RGBA values, and you hopefully, you haven't spent all your time memorizing what all those are, but maybe it would be a little bit easier if we just said, hey, what if I hit Command-E and I get, let's see, go back over to my H1 tag here, and now I actually get an inline visual color picker. So it's that same sort of look and feel that you've seen in Reflow. We're trying to keep everything as consistent as possible, and I can actually then go ahead and start changing this, and we can actually see those changes then live as we're going. Now, of course, live editing and all this isn't just related to colors and font sizes. Pretty much anything you do in CSS will actually get translated into through that document. Now, today in Edge code, we only support live CSS, but we're actively working on bringing live HTML, and we believe we can bring live JavaScript into this as well. So being able to inject JavaScript live into a running page. So pretty cool stuff. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what's different about Edge code. Let me go back here and make sure everything looks cool. So with Edge code, we've created this distribution of brackets that is highly focused on the Creative Cloud members, and it's highly focused on bringing these Edge tools and services together. So one of the new services that we just announced about a week ago or 10 days ago is the Edge Web Font Service, which is a new service that basically allows us to embed free, high quality, and curated fonts into our application. It's pretty simple. You basically embed the font. You basically can select what you want, and then you need to put a script tag in, and that's how we know how to load the font at runtime. So with Edge code, we really try to hide a lot of the complexity of the application and only expose it at the right time. And so that's how we're trying to manage to keep all these icons out of the way and floating panels and whatnot. And so I'm going to go back over to my CSS file again. And when I actually go to define a new font, the likely place to do it, let's say if we'll do it on this H1, is when I'm doing the font family. So I'll go ahead and specify font family. And now the Edge Web Font extension, or the feature of Edge code, is actually going to prompt me and show me all the web-safe fonts that I've used, or even ones that I've used in my product already. But it also gives me this ability to actually browse to the fonts. So this is a live browser, connects out to the Edge Web Font service, and then pulls back all of those fonts. Now, what I really, really like about this service is that showing me 500 different fonts that I have to scroll through would be not very helpful, right? In fact, I want to be able to actually categorize them, get to the ones I want. So I can actually use this interface to say, all right, am I looking for paragraph fonts? Am I looking for header fonts? We've got some crazy cool looking fonts like this one. Let's see what I'm feeling in the mood for. Feeling something sort of crazy. Let's go with Cabin Sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and select Cabin Sketch. And you'll see it automatically gets added into here. Now, I am running in live, and it's saying, hey, I don't know what Cabin Sketch is, so I haven't embedded that script yet. So Edge Web Font feature is actually going to help you do that. If I go back up to this icon now, click on that, you'll see we actually have generated that embed code for you dynamically. Now, depending on how many fonts you're using, this embed code is going to change. And so you can all of a sudden just grab this guy. I'm going to go ahead and copy him. And I can paste him into my page. Now, you might be wondering, hey, why didn't you just inject this into that HTML page for me already? Well, we strongly believe that a code editor shouldn't be generating code that you're completely unaware of. And for this reason, we want you to actually go and put the code in, but we can help you kind of get there. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down this guy, put him at the end of my page, because that way he won't stop the loading of the project. Hit Command V. Am I doing this wrong? Boop. Boop. Get out of there. And I've got that font now that's in there. Now, because we don't support live HTML just quite yet, I do have to do that sort of old-fashioned save reload dance, hopefully maybe for not much longer. I'll go back over here, kick over back to my CSS file, make sure that Cabin Sketch is there. And as you can see, I've got Cabin Sketch now running live in my designer. Now, because Adobe Edge code is also based on that Brackets open source project, all the extensions that the community is building are also available here as well. One of the really cool ones that I've seen out, and I always have it installed, is this idea of a scrubber. So if I actually hit Command font size, I can actually scrub this by moving my mouse back and forth. So I can actually kind of get the right font size that fits my design. So pretty cool stuff. So as you can see, this is a coding tool that's really meant for doing all of your coding live in the browser. Now, the last thing I want to show you is a little bit early stages, but it's kind of heading where it's kind of an idea of where we're heading with Edge Web Fonts. And this is idea for PhoneGap support. So you saw that, let me just go ahead and close this guy. So you saw that, Command Shift H. You saw that Ryan was talking about PhoneGap Build and the ability to build these projects without having to install the SDKs. Locally on your machine, and that's a pretty big deal to us. So that means that our lightweight text editor can actually leverage the power of the cloud to actually compile mobile applications. You don't have to go and get Xcode or go and get Android DevTools and install all that sort of stuff. So we've been working on a little extension for our new feature of Edge code for PhoneGap Build support. So I'm actually going to go ahead and click on the PhoneGap Build logo. And what you're going to see here is it's going to ask me to go ahead and log in. So I'm hopefully not going to clear type my password in here. And so what we're doing is we're actually going out and talking to the PhoneGap Build service, and we're actually going to pull back all the different projects that we have here. So you can actually see there's the 3 projects that I had created. There's the one that Ryan created a bit earlier. But now I have access to all the same sort of things that I used to have to go to the website for. And that's great. I can actually rebuild these if I want. So maybe I'll go and say, let's rebuild Ryan's project. And you can see these icons will actually shift. Well, they should shift. Oh, it rebuilt really fast. But the idea is that once the project is done, I can actually click on these builds and get that QR code live in my development environment. Again, not really needing to go out to this other website to actually go and do that stuff. So that's great. I'm not really showing you quite anything new. What would be nice, though, is if we could sort of link our projects to the PhoneGap projects and actually upload code automatically. So we now have support for that. So this is just a simple HTML project. In fact, Edge code doesn't have the notion of what a project is. We just pointed at a folder full of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and that's what you're editing. So we need to say, hey, this folder that I'm looking at is actually this PhoneGap application. So I can actually go ahead and here and say, link it to my PhoneGap Build project. So I can actually set it to which one I want. So I'll go ahead and call this one PhoneGap Demo. Or you know what? I'll just overwrite Ryan's, whatever. And I can then go ahead here. It's linked to this project. And if I go ahead and change this, like to say hello Asia, or spell it correctly, I can go ahead and save my project, and then actually go ahead and upload it. So send those files to PhoneGap Build. Are you sure you want to overwrite that? I'm positive. Now what we're doing is we're overwriting those files up there, so it just wants to make sure you're definitely positive. So as you notice, it's going to go ahead and start uploading this to PhoneGap Build service. That'll automatically trigger a rebuild of all of those things as well. And so that's basically a nice development environment. Now you can imagine though, when we put all these sort of pieces together, like such as using hydration with PhoneGap Build, we can get very, very close to this idea is the code that I'm writing in my editor, I hit build, goes up to the PhoneGap Build service, comes down through hydration, and automatically shows up to your phone. So that same sort of live development experience we have on the browser, we think we're really, really close to actually having it live on your device as well. So with that, it's my honor to bring up Director Mike Chambers to tell you a little bit more about the Edge tools and services.
Great. Thanks a lot, Adam.
Thank you.
So you're probably wondering, how can Okay, so now you're probably wondering, wow, these are great. How do I get access to all these great tools and services? So again, Adobe Edge Tools and Services creates a complete suite of applications and family of applications created for modern web development, design and development. Underlined by 3 key tenets, optimized for creating mobile-ready web content and applications, focused on a specific task, and improving productivity without hiding the underlying web technologies. So you're probably wondering, how do I get these? These are great. I'm sold. So about earlier this year, we launched Adobe Creative Cloud. Adobe Creative Cloud is an online service for accessing all the Adobe Creative tools and services, as well as providing other services such as integrated file sharing, collaboration, and access to the latest updates to all those tools. And this last point is actually particularly important because with the modern, doing development for the modern web, things are changing very fast. And so you want tools that can respond just as quickly. So this has been available for most of the year now. And one thing that we have as a part of Creative Cloud that a lot of people aren't aware of is that we also have a free tier of Creative Cloud. And so I'm really excited to announce that all the Adobe Edge tools and services that we've been talking about today are available as part of the free tier of the Adobe Creative Cloud. And so just to reiterate that and make sure it didn't go by anyone, all the tools, Edge tools and services that we talked about today and that you see on the slide now, these are all available for free. And this includes a complete perpetual license to Edge Animate 1.0. And so in order to get access to these, you just go to html.adobe.com, click the information around Edge tools and services, and sign up for your free Creative Cloud account, and you have access to all these tools and services. So we're really excited about the work that you guys have been doing, especially pushing the boundaries of the web forward, about the content you've been created. We're really excited to see what you're going to do with the Adobe Edge tools and services. Just a quick reminder, we'll actually be coming out through the Asian and Pacific region in November, doing a tour, bringing out some of these tools and services, talk to you about them in person. So keep an eye out on html.adobe.com/events for more information. And again, everything we talked about today, all the tools and services, the web platform work we're doing, you can always find the latest information on Adobe and the web at html.adobe.com. So thank you for joining us today. Have a good morning or evening, depending on where you are, and thank you very much.